back, everyone, and we will kick off straight away with our next talk. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Jazmine Benjamin, who is a postdoctoral research fellow at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Jazmine will be talking about how to craft a statement of purpose when it comes to writing funding applications. So Jazmine, welcome, and please do take it away.
Yeah, Alice, thanks for having me. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay and see the slides. If not, just drop something in the chat and I'll make adjustments as needed. So thank you for the introduction and thank you for the invitation. I know this conference is kind of situated in the UK, but I am currently in Tennessee in the United States. So it's about 8:30 in the morning for me. So glad to kind of have this as something to do first thing in the day. So, as the title suggests, I'll be talking to you about creating a statement of purpose for your funding applications. Obviously, there's so much more that goes into creating a complete application packet, but as it turns out, the statement of purpose is usually kind of a sticky point for a lot of people. So, hopefully, what I share today will be useful. And I know that having 3 letters behind my name doesn't necessarily convey that I am someone who is qualified to talk about this. And I'm probably not the most qualified person, but I do have a pretty extensive history of applying for funding opportunities. Those include opportunities in research. So here in the United States, one of our main funding bodies is the National Institutes of Health, and they offer a variety of funding opportunities from predoctoral all the way through to senior faculty. And so I've applied for the F31, which is a predoctoral research training fellowship. I've also applied for 2 F32s, both the predoctoral and postdoctoral ones. So the predoctoral one funded my last couple years of grad school, and the postdoctoral one is funding my first year of my postdoc. And so the training grants, the T32s, are really more of an institutional grant that's meant to support the training of a predoctoral or postdoctoral student while kind of keeping things short term. So they usually don't go much longer than 2 years. I've also applied for funding through the American Heart Association and the National Science Foundation. Um, there's also opportunities for professional development, so travel awards, micro grants, organizational and societal fellowships. And then I've also served on a number of admissions committees, including those at the graduate and undergraduate level. And I've also read through applications for summer experiences for students who are interested in research. So I have a good bit of experience with not just writing personal statements, but also reading them, engaging other people's kind of reactions to different kinds of things that are expressed in personal statements. So why are personal statements important? For starters, they set the stage for the rest of your application. Normally, the personal statement is one of the things that goes up front in your application, and that's because it gives the reviewers an idea of who you are, of what's important to you, of how well you can communicate. And those things are quite important and can be quite weighty in terms of whether or not you receive a funding opportunity. They also allow you to showcase your strengths, whether this is written communication, whether this is you letting them know that you've published 5 papers while you were in grad school, 5 first author publications. This allows you to kind of cherry pick the things that are most important to you and put those things on display front and center. It also allows you to explain the finer points of your experience. If you're an undergraduate who's applying for a funding opportunity and you had a semester where your grades slipped a little bit, just looking at your transcript, they might say, oh, this person isn't consistent in keeping high grades. But in your personal statement, you'd be able to kind of explain that I was really sick that semester or I had mental health issues and really kind of plead your case, if you will. And then lastly, it gives the reviewers insight into who you are prior to formal interviews. Some of these opportunities have kind of a multifactorial application process where you submit a paper application packet, they read through that, and then based on that, they'll move to a second round of application or second round of interviews in person. And so your personal statement can give them a little bit of insight into how you think and your personality before they meet you in person. So I split this talk into 5 points, and I understand I have 30 minutes, so I'll try to keep things really brief. The first thing is understanding the audience. And I think this is arguably one of the most important parts of creating your personal statement. So the first thing that you want to do is research the funding organization or the organizations that are available to you based on your field of research. Use your resources for this. I think one of the easiest ways is to just hop on Google or your preferred search engine and just type in funding opportunities in insert field here. You'll get a lot of stuff. You'll get the big funding bodies, perhaps the ones that are sponsored by the government, and then you'll also eventually get down to things that are a little bit more private in terms of funding. Those often have a little bit less extensive of an application process, but will likely still include a personal statement. A lot of universities here in the United States, particularly the research intensive universities, have an office of research. A lot of those universities are really braggadocious about how much research funding they bring in. And so they have entire offices geared toward making sure that research funding continues to increase. So reaching out to your university's office of research, they are often more than happy to help you find opportunities, happy to help you put your application packet together because it makes their job easier and it helps the research application and hopefully research funding numbers go up for the university. So utilize that resource as well. Lastly, second to lastly, your mentor or advisor will likely be the person who tells you what kind of opportunities to apply for. They usually have insight into kind of who's sitting on what committees to review these things, and they also likely have students who have applied for those things in the past. And lastly, ask your classmates. If you are part of a cohort of students coming into grad school and you're all interested in the same kind of research, ask your classmates, ask more senior students what opportunities they applied for and if they enjoyed them or didn't. Those are also very important questions to ask. But overall, just utilize your resources, utilize the people around you. Opportunity, you then want to first search for pertinent details. So the first thing you want to look for is relevance to your work. I'm a scientist, so I am interested in hypertension. I would not apply for a funding opportunity that has to do with mass spectrometry. I don't know the first thing about it. So when I find one, the first thing I look at is to make sure that they are looking for someone who has either a broad or specific interest that's very close to mine. Next, look for due dates. I will not apply for anything that is anything less than 60 days away from being due. There's a lot more than the personal statement that goes into an application packet. Oftentimes, it requires support from your PI, it requires other recommendation letters, and those things can take quite a while to get a hold of. So if it's less than 2 months out, I just kind of put that one aside. With that being said, you want to look at the frequency of application cycles. For things like the F-31, they have multiple application cycles a year, and they're around the same time every year. So perhaps this application or this opportunity that you're looking at is due in a month, but they have another application cycle opening up in 6 months. Don't be afraid if you have the time to just kind of delay. You would rather submit a fully prepared application that you're proud of in 6 months rather than just throwing something together in a month and then not getting funded anyway. Then lastly, any supplemental forms that might be available. Again, these may include letters of support from your PI, letters of support from an additional PI if you have more of a junior advisor. It can include other recommendation letters or even formal transcripts. So make sure that you're aware of those things so you can get a hold of them well before you need them. And then lastly, the application criteria, you want to make sure that you're qualified to be able to apply for that opportunity. If it's a postdoctoral fellowship as a predoctoral student, you can't really apply for that. So make sure that you're paying attention to those things as well. So next thing that you want to do is tailor your personal statement to the criteria. And this is something I usually create an outline of my personal statement up front and then work from there. So there are a couple things to consider. Firstly, the length. Should it be 2 pages? Should it be 1 page? Do I have an unlimited length? There's usually a length requirement because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of applications that a single study section or committee has to go through. So they try to keep the personal statements rather short. Consider formatting. Some want a very specific font and very specific margins. Pay attention to that stuff. That's a very quick way to get your application thrown out. Specific focal points. If you're applying for a research specific funding opportunity, you will want to focus on your research. If you're applying for one that's more of a professional development opportunity, you may want to focus on your training or your educational background. So consider that as well. And in your statement, be prepared to address some basic questions. Firstly, what kind of work are you doing? Are you doing your PhD in history or fine arts? Are you doing more of a science or biomedical science? Be prepared to kind of explain what kind of work you're doing and also why it matters. I know for a lot of scientists, we're ultimately trying to cure a disease or make life easier for some group of people. For historians, it may be preserving history and making sure that past transgressions aren't repeated. But these are all important things to convey in your personal statement is why it's important. Why should the committee care about what it is that you're doing? And then lastly, you want to make sure that you convey why this opportunity is a good fit for you. Not just that, but why you're a good fit for this opportunity. A lot of these programs, particularly in terms of training grants, they have renewal periods. So every year or two, they have to resubmit to get more money for their training grants. And part of that submission packet to get more funding is showing these are the students that we funded, this is how successful they were, this is where they are now. So you want to convey that while this is a good fit for me, I'm a all A student. I, got top marks on all my exams. I'm doing great. You also want to convey to them that I fit well here because I'm going to represent this funding opportunity well, and you're going to be proud of me. So make sure that you consider and put time in to address those questions. So next thing is crafting a compelling narrative. And I usually am told to tell a story. But in my last appearance at a Hello Bio event, I kind of tweaked that a little bit into selling your story. At the end of the day, you're asking for money. Um, in that event, you're really kind of selling something. You're giving a business pitch, so to speak. And so the first thing is to just get everything on paper. That's the most important part. And I'll touch on that a little bit in a couple slides. But you're going to be the PI for your grant. If you get an F31, you are the PI on that grant. So you need to sell your product and you also need to sell yourself. You need to make the study section or the review committee feel like this is the next best thing that's going to happen in your given field. You need to aim for a strong opening statement, and I'll talk in the next couple slides about how to do that. Define your terms, especially I see this happen a lot in things like immunology, where there's a lot of abbreviations for things that people just kind of throw them in like seasoning, and they don't necessarily take time to explain what those things are. That becomes very overwhelming very quickly, and it's a surefire way to get your application thrown out. Then also have a clear idea of what the ultimate payoff of your research is. Especially in the sciences, not everything is going to cure something. Sometimes it's that we're creating something that's going to lead to a pharmaceutical therapy that's going to be helpful. Sometimes it's just improving the quality of life for someone with a terminal illness. So have a clear idea of what your research is ultimately going to go toward and be very specific about that. And then, as I said before, consider why the organization should invest in you and why it would benefit them. So next we'll go into the key components of a personal statement. If you've written any kind of report before, then this is probably pretty cut and dry for you. It's an introduction, body, conclusion. So for your introduction, as I said before, you want to aim for a strong opening statement. You want to hook the reviewers early. Consider that your application might be the 100th one that they're reading that day, and they're probably tired and they just want to get through that last one and go have a beer and watch TV. So you want to hook them early. You want to avoid cliche starts. In my time on admissions committees, I could almost boil it down to one of these four things. Since I was a child, I've always been interested in science, or I've always been interested in history. Fire-related metaphors are very popular, so I've always had a burning desire to do this, or this sparked my interest in science. For those, I would recommend getting out a thesaurus and finding another way to convey your passion. Direct interactions, these are probably my least favorite. These are, I'm applying for this funding opportunity because blah, blah, blah. zero creativity, kind of shows that this is really more perhaps you're checking a box than anything else. Even if you're not, that's how it comes off. And then next is quotes. Usually they're not really related to whatever your story is. Perhaps you didn't know what else to start your story with, so you went with a quote. So I always tell people to avoid these cliche starts unless you're telling a very vivid story. So, as opposed to, since I was a child, I've always been interested in science, or I really enjoy studying science. You might instead say, I've always enjoyed the thrill of discovery. And I vividly remember spending hours as a kindergartner trying to learn some obscure language or what have you. That gives a little bit more color to your language. And it also, it's different than just saying, I've always been interested in this since I was a child. The thrill of discovery is a way that conveys your passion as well. And I've always told people to consider something called a circular narrative. This is probably one of my favorite things that I don't see often in personal statements. And that is literally introducing a scenario at the beginning of your personal statement. So perhaps saying, I've always enjoyed the thrill of discovery. I remember spending hours as a kindergartner with my grandparents, looking at trees, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, bringing your conclusion back to whatever it was you introduced at the beginning. Perhaps, you're applying for a botany opportunity and you say, with my research, I'll be able to make sure that there are plenty of trees for future children to look at with their grandparents. That kind of connecting the end to the beginning is not something that we see very often. It's a really great way to tell and sell your story. And then my last tip is to just write your main content first, write the body of your application, and then return to the introduction last. Sometimes you get good ideas about how to start by focusing on something else. So, in the body of your statement, you're going to explain and again sell yourself. You want to showcase your relevant experience, whether that is your research, your educational background, your accomplishments. You want to give plenty of evidence supporting your fitness for this specific opportunity. And in that, you want to be specific. What will this opportunity offer you? Will it offer you a chance to explore a research question that's been burning in your mind? Will it give you the chance to participate in a professional development opportunity that's not offered at your university that no one else has done? Those are things that you need to be very specific about. And you also need to be specific, especially if you're doing a research related application, how you're qualified to study your question. Is your lab the only one in the world that has this specific technique? Was your lab the one that discovered this particular artifact in a church somewhere and you are the only person that can do this? You need to tell them why they need to fund you because no one else can do this. And then in your conclusion, you're going to express the impact of the opportunity and again, go with that circular narrative, tie it back to your introduction. And then think ahead. Include future goals for yourself or for your research. If it's a professional development opportunity, express how that's going to help you have a successful career in your given field. If it's for your research, explain how you plan on taking this research with you to your next level, whether that's doctoral degree or postdoc, even if you're not going to do those things, it shows that you're really thinking ahead about this investment. And then express again how this opportunity will make those goals a reality. Will it give you time and money to chase that research question? Will it allow you that professional development opportunity? Think ahead about those things and say them very explicitly. So next thing is to address some common challenges, and I'll keep this pretty brief. First thing is writer's block. I think we've all been kind of assaulted by this, and usually writer's block turns into procrastination. So my first and most important piece of advice is to start early and write often. So if I have a application that's due in 3 months, I'm going to start writing today. And I'm going to start with maybe 5 minutes today. Maybe I just open a document and save it. And then tomorrow, maybe I'll write for 30 minutes. Over the weekend, I might write for an hour. But by the time I get through about a month, I will have a really good working draft of my personal statement that I feel comfortable with. And that's much easier than waiting until the last minute and just word vomiting on a piece of paper and hoping for the best. With that being said, a good draft is a done draft. Um, the best thing you can do is just get it done and move on to getting feedback on it. Uh, with that said, save every draft before you make changes. This has happened to me so much, especially in graduate school, that I would write a draft. My PI would say, "Oh, take this paragraph out." I take the paragraph out. 5 drafts later, he says, "Oh, you had a paragraph before about XYZ." And I had deleted that file. I cannot remember what I said. So now I save every single draft so that when that happens, I'm like, no problem. Go back to that first draft, copy that, paste it into the new draft, and save myself plenty of time in English. In that, I also use what I call a trash file or a dump file. This is just a giant file that I have on Google. I think it's Google Docs. It's probably about 50 pages now. And it is literally just things that maybe I word vomited and it makes no sense to me at that moment. And I take it out of that document, I put it into the trash file. And months down the road, when I'm writing a paper or something, I may be looking for a specific citation or something like that. I can go back to that trash file, kind of scroll through and find what it is that I'm looking for. And so I have a bunch of stuff in there. I have previous personal statements. I have paragraphs that didn't make it into my dissertation. I have all sorts of things in that file. You never know when they're going to be useful. So I just dump everything there and I'll come back to it if I need it in the future. The next thing is kind of something that I do personally. I have a very strong internal dialogue, and I'm just now learning that some people don't have that. So if you don't have that, don't do this. But write in a stream of consciousness. For me, I genuinely will write as it comes to my mind. So I may say, hypertension is one of the top 10 causes of mortality globally, and I'll dot 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 um, insert a citation about this here, dot, dot, dot. So that kind of thing, where I'm really kind of having a conversation with myself, and then I'll go back and I'll insert that citation or what have you. So I leave myself notes as I go. The next thing is to abandon perfectionism. It's never going to be perfect. You're going to submit it, and then you're going to say, "Oh, I should have said this. I should have talked about this opportunity." It's never going to be perfect, especially if it's a first draft. The most important thing is to just get it on paper. The next thing is to find a writing group. So if you're someone who performs well in front of others in terms of being at a coffee shop or a library, find a virtual or an in-person writing group and have some accountability for yourself and help yourself to be accountable for others. That's one of the really great ways, great things about, I guess, the new virtual age that we're in is that you can hop on a Zoom call with someone and not say a word and get 5 pages written just because you have someone else that's kind of staring at you. And then lastly is to walk away from it, but come back. Um, I find that when I'm writing, I may write for an hour and then I'll go take a walk for an hour. And on that walk, some magical connection between two things will come to me because I'm not actively thinking about it. Um, take time away from your writing. Write for 10 minutes and then take a 20-minute walk or read a book for 20 minutes. Do something else where you're not actively thinking about that. You'll be surprised at how quickly some ideas will come to you. The next thing is balancing confidence and humility. And I know I'm kind of getting to the end of my time here, so I may skip a couple things at the end. But I think this one's important because when we're applying for applications, obviously we want to talk about our strengths. We want to talk about the awards we've gotten, the papers we've published, all this good stuff that we've done, how we are just the apex predator in terms of our academic achievements. But you don't want to be a braggart, right? So you want to contextualize your experiences. If you say, I got this award for doing XYZ, you want to contextualize that award. I was a graduate student. This project was very important to me. And so I was really proud to win this award given how much time I put into that project. You want to show, don't tell. Some of these applications will require you to submit your CV also. In that case, you don't need to list everything that you've done. They'll look at your CV. You need to pick out the things that are most important that you have really salient memories of and include those things in your personal statement. You'll be able to talk about them with a little more vigor, but you'll also there'll be things that you're proud of, and that's really what's important. You want to emphasize your effort. If one of your papers won a cover on a magazine, you want to talk about how involved you were in that process. I edited the manuscript, or I wrote the manuscript, or I contributed to figures. Um, be very specific about what your role was in any given effort. Don't compare yourself to others. Um, Something I really don't like in personal statements is when people say, I won this award and that put me among the 1% of students that blah blah blah. We we don't really care about the percentage. What's important is that you won the award and hopefully you worked hard for it and hopefully it's a proud moment for you. Don't compare yourself to others. That comes off as being a little bit haughty. Celebrate others. I've seen in a couple of applications that people will say that they've won an award or on a co-author, co-first author paper, and they will give a little bit of honor to the person that they won it with. So they'll say, I won this with another grad student, and it was a really great team effort. That's really important. It shows that you're able to work in a team, you're quite humble, and you're also not afraid to give other people their flowers when necessary. Say the word because. For some reason, people don't do this. There is a 1978 study, I think the author was Ellen Langer, that found that when people use the word because to explain something, that others are more likely to respond positively. Something about, I guess, the casualness of it, and often a more formal type of application process makes things a little bit more personable. So don't be afraid to use because and to link your thoughts together in that way. And lastly, it's not all about you. Your personal statement is personal, obviously, but there are other things that you're also going to have to address. Um, if you, again, have had joint efforts on things, you'll want to talk about the teamwork aspect of it. You are part of a lab group. You're not an island. So consider that it's not always all about you, and that there's going to be the involvement of others, and you'll need to address that. With my last 2 minutes, I will very quickly go through quick tips for editing and refining your personal statement. Um, so ask for review help early and be very selective in who you ask. Don't go and ask someone who doesn't have time to do it. Get someone with no knowledge of your field to look at it, someone who's never done what you've done before, and make sure that if they understand it, you're probably in the clear. Be very clear on what feedback you need. Sometimes when I would give my PI a piece of writing, I'd say, can you help me cut out 100 words from this? Or can you look at the introduction? I'm not sure about if that makes sense. And then lastly, and most importantly, don't take it personally. If you're asking for a critique, people oftentimes are not trying to be malicious. They genuinely want you to have the best possible product for your application. So if you get it back and it's covered in red, take a moment and seethe about it, and then go and address all of those things, and you'll be much better for it. Read it aloud. Uh, Sounds weird. You'll pick up on so much more if you read it aloud. Make sure that you're minding your word and character count. A lot of these have a length requirement. Don't go over that. And then lastly, I recommend using a proofreading software. One of my favorites is Grammarly. You can literally copy and paste your document in there, and it will give you all kinds of grammatical and stylistic tips that you're more than welcome to accept or decline. And I'll skip over the do's and don'ts. The most important thing here is to start early, be patient, don't strive for perfection, and lastly, don't worry about it. Everything will be fine. You'll have other opportunities, whether you receive this funding opportunity or not, to apply again. And every time that you apply, you learn something. You get feedback from people who have read your work and looked at your entire packet, and you can use that to be better each time. So hopefully that was helpful, and I am more than happy to chat with people. Here's how you can get a hold of me. The best way is probably my website at the bottom. Um, and I wish everyone the best on their future applications. I know you'll all find success in one way or another. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. That was such a detailed and thorough presentation. That was absolutely brilliant. And my background is in writing, and I learned a lot from that presentation. So that's fantastic. We've got a couple of very, very quick questions before we get on our panel that I'd really like to ask that have come up in the chat.
Sure.
The first one is, it seems that this advice could be transposed to funding applications in different parts of the world, i.e. outside the US. So is that,
Mhm.
would you say that's the case as well? This isn't US centric advice. This is actually pretty universal advice when it comes to writing funding applications.
Absolutely. Yeah, I knew that, this is includes some of my friends across the pond, and so this is totally global advice for all fields and all locations.
Fantastic. And then just finally, someone's asked, can you use ChatGPT to give you the basis of your applications, or is that a big no-no?
Actually, I just was in a talk about this, about using ChatGPT ethically. Obviously, you don't use ChatGPT to write your personal statement for you, but you can use it. For example, an example prompt would be, give me an outline for a personal statement for a NIH fellowship focused on mass spectrometry, and it will give you an outline. I've done that more often than I care to admit, and it's extremely helpful. So yes, I would say use ChatGPT ethically. Don't use it to write for you, but use it to help you with the creative process.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Thank you so, so much, Jasmine. That was absolutely brilliant. And you've sparked a lot of discussion in the chat. So hopefully in between your experiments, you can go into the chat and just see what everyone's been saying, because that was, yeah, a lot of people found that very helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you again for having me.